Mr. Rothschild, how you doing, sir? Could you tell us what went on at the Bilderberg meeting this year?
I didn't go to that, actually, no.
The Bilderberg? You weren't there?
No.
Not this year. What went on last year?
No, I wasn't there last year.
You weren't there last
I think
year?
that was my cousin.
Your cousin was there?
Yeah, I think so. Okay.
As I was saying that the Federal Reserve is one of these organizations. It's one of these organizations that a lot of people say is the source of inhumane thoughts all across the world because it's a private bank.
That was started by your family.
No, it's completely untrue. I was asked that earlier. It really isn't true. No.
Jekyll Island. How your family committed all these acts against society, but we just want to let you know the New World Order has no legitimacy, and that we as a people are not afraid, and we are waking up to the robber barons and the big banksters who are looting this economy with the Federal Reserve.
Well,
Rothschild. Illuminati ball. How the elites also control Israel. We've got that. Dark legacy of control. So this is Jacob Rothschild. He was also known as the fourth Baron Rothschild, born on April 29th, 1936, died at age 87. He's most well known for his involvement, again, in the family's global investment banking and finance businesses that set the tone for the fiat currency and fractional reserve banking scams that plague our world today. Also, the Rothschilds were instrumental in the establishment of the modern state of Israel. So when it comes to investigative journalism, research, and writers who have worked to expose the dark side of history over the last 30 years, the name Rothschild shows up early and often. And that's because they are documented and unapologetic war profiteers. Right from the start. The Rothschild family is a European family of German and Ashkenazi Jewish origin. But it was not that simple. They didn't just rise to power. The first known ancestor of the Rothschild family was Isaac Elkanan, who was born in 1577. Now, this is Meyer Amschel Rothschild. Just to give you an example of, kind of how this operates. Before he died in 1812, he banned his female descendants from receiving an inheritance, which forced them to intermarry with their Rothschild cousins in order to remain in the same social strata. Meanwhile, N.M. Rothschild and Sons Limited, this is the London branch of the Rothschild banking dynasty, nearly single-handedly financed the British Napoleonic War effort. We've got great details about that in our article. And the family's wealth also helped finance the construction of the Suez Canal, various railways in Europe, and secured a mercury monopoly, a valuable commodity, as mercury was then used to refine gold and silver. Also, the robber barons of the mid to late 19th century or the 1800s in America were also servants of the Rothschilds because they all borrowed money to build their empires here. Now, the Rothschilds are most often accused of using their wealth to steer the course of the global economy or to fund both sides of wars, the Civil War in America, for example. But they're also known for stuff like this. This is the Illuminati Ball from 1972, hosted by Baroness Marie Helene de Rothschild and her husband, Guy. This eccentric evening featured otherworldly costumes, bizarre decorations, and allegedly satanic symbolism. You can decide for yourself. Only a few photos that actually survive of this event. So this was in December of 1972, and it's still raising eyebrows today. But the Rothschilds are no strangers to controversy, right? When guests received their invitations to this, the invitation was written backwards, so they had to hold it up into a mirror so they could understand it. The servants inside were dressed as cats. Dessert was a mannequin of a nude woman made entirely of sugar, laid on a bed of roses. Costumes worn by attendees were just as bizarre. So Salvador Dali was in the house. Salvador Dali didn't wear a costume, it says here. He didn't need to, right? Most of these are celebrities. You can't recognize who they are. You'll recognize Audrey Hepburn probably. Yeah, how about that? That's normal. That's the host.
That looks very Midsummer.
It does, doesn't it?
Very,
Ari
very
Aster?
Ari
Ari Aster, that movie, which was also disturbing. I felt nauseated after that one, literally. Yeah, here. Perfumer, Helena Rojas.
The Death Cult.
There is Audrey Hepburn with a bird cage on her head. I guess that may have been maybe the most comfortable of the costumes and get-ups. Yeah, there you go. Just babies. Nothing to see here. Just babies and burnt corpses. Because that's how you have dinner when you're a normal, God-fearing family. Just a normal Jewish family. Here we go. Here's more. Supermodel Marissa Berenson. Never heard of her. And there you go. The apple. It's kind of Adam and Eve-ish, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it was not an apple. Everyone thinks it was an apple, but that's just folklore. Ultimately, whatever happened within the walls of this place on that night, or in the forest behind the chateau, remains a mystery. But we've got these few pictures from there, from the event. Might have been just an eccentric evening for high society to let loose, and several conspiracy theories suggest that the event was more than it appears. Perhaps it was. It is believed that Stanley Kubrick patterned this scene and this cult, patterned it after in these groups.
Also, all of these images are reminding me of the images that we saw a few years ago from Marina Abramovic.
Interesting that you would bring up Marina. There you go, son. What do you think about that? There is...
That's a shocker.
Lord Rothschild and Marina Abramovich, the person who put this up, says, does it all make sense now? Jacob Rothschild, widely accepted as the man who created Israel. You know, he's not the one who created Israel, but it was definitely two of his uncles that had everything to do with it. He continued that. He continued the support in the 20th century, but the groundwork for the creation of the State of Israel was in the mid-1800s, late 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
And then with the Balfour Declaration in 1917. And Jacob wasn't born until 1936. So Israel became a nation when he was about 11 or 12 years old. But he certainly did keep up the tradition. So yeah, there you go. Here is Prince Charles.
The Climate King.
People are loving it. They're Lord Jacob Rothschild died exactly 6 years, 6 months, and 6 days after the August 21st, 2017 eclipse, and exactly 6 weeks before the upcoming April 8th, 2024 eclipse. Number of the beast. Folks, he's not the beast. Interesting. Let's listen to this clip of Jacob Rothschild talking about this is the letter, November 2nd, 1917. This would have been Lord Rothschild. This would have been to his uncle Edmund, I believe. Edmund or Walter, one of the two. Let's see.
In modern Jewish history, and it begins with 3 words. Dear Lord Rothschild.
Dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the Cabinet.
Why was it that this letter was sent by the Foreign Secretary to your great-uncle Walter?
It's an interesting question because it was primarily a movement from Eastern Europe, but they didn't clarify who was in charge of that movement. And in addition, it was, after all, in Great Britain. So they felt that the Rothschild family should be the one to whom it was addressed. And Walter was Lord Rothschild, and he was a Zionist. And those really are the background reasons.
Somebody said Israel's a fake state created by evil globalists. All right, well, I'm not going to argue with it. In Chapter 1 of Howard Sakar's A History of the Jews in the Modern World, we read. Now, this is about where the Rothschilds emerged from. Frankfurt, in what we today call Germany, was one of the 4 remaining free cities of the Holy Roman Empire in the 16th century. Specifically here we're talking about, let's put ourselves in the middle of the 16th century, 1750s or 60s. It was one of the German world's 3 most important commercial trading posts, or it was a port on the Main River. In the city's principal business center, there was a large wooden gate demarcating still another townlet within the larger urban area, a ganglion of twisting alleys, ramshackle storefronts, and cramped apartment structures. The gate's solitary entrance guarded by an armed warden. The little enclosure was the Judengasse, the Jews' lane. It was the ghetto of the Jews. Unquote. This scene was typical throughout West Central Europe. The Jews lived like unwelcome immigrants, even though their ancestors had lived on European soil as far back as the Roman Empire, or as far back as the height of the Roman Empire. So this would have been, if this was, let's say this 1700s, we're talking about, 1800 years since the first century, or since before the first century, since before Christ. Well, the Frankfurt settlement can be traced back to the 11th century, when approximately 200 Jews settled there in rat-infested slum condition. In the 14th century, the bubonic plague hit Frankfurt. Now, plague is a disease spread by fleas that proliferate on rats or animals, but when there's a lot of rats, a lot of fleas, this is an issue. This could be a danger. So, since rumors fueled by fear and panic spread as fast as the disease, and in many places the Jews alone were blamed for the ravages of the Black Death. Fear and superstition caused an outbreak of brutal violence toward the Jews in these days. Now, Meyer Amschel Rothschild, known as the founder of the family, was born in Frankfurt's Jewish ghetto in 1744. As the 4th of 8 children, his father, Amschel Moses Rothschild, was a money changer and a silk cloth dealer. At age 13, Meyer went to Hanover to serve an apprenticeship with the bank of Wolf Jakob Oppenheim. At age 19, he returned to Frankfurt, where he became a dealer in rare coins and set up his own money-changing operation. Essentially, what money changing is here is it is loaning liquid assets, or what we today would call cash, loaning liquid assets at a price. And it's called usury in the Bible. But Meyer was later on honored by Wilhelm IX of Hesse with an aristocratic title, which is, we talk about that in the, he had his aristocratic title, and then his son in London, Nathan, who was in London, and his son Solomon in Austria also were given aristocratic titles of nobility. Well, Meyer's banking business expanded to become one of the biggest in Frankfurt. This was the first of the deeply powerful connections that would establish the Rothschilds as the source of capital for kings, wars, nation building, and nation killing. Right? Because you can't just say, oh, well, look what they built there in the Levant. It's the nation of Israel, right? Because something had to go to make way for that, right? Something had to be moved out. Something had to be killed. Meyer Rothschild had 5 sons whom he strategically dispatched to the 5 major financial centers of Europe, where each would establish the family method of fiat currency manipulation. This ensured that all the markets of Europe would be under the influences of the Red Shield. Son number 3 was Nathan Meyer Rothschild. He was sent to England, where he eventually settled in London, establishing N.M. Rothschild and Sons in London. He married Hannah Berendt Cohen in 1806, with whom he had 7 children, 3 daughters and 4 sons. In Austria, 5 family lines were given aristocratic titles of nobility by Emperor Francis II in 1816. So this is where all the connections were established. This is where they finally, shall we say, can we say tentacles? Would we say tentacles? Into everything.
Put the feelers out.
They became barons of the Habsburg Empire. Later, Queen Victoria elevated the branch of the family in England into British nobility. Now, the family crest depicts a clutch of 5 arrows representing each son and their unity and purpose, which was wealth acquisition. The arrows, according to the description they would give of their crest, the arrows reference Psalm 127, which says, "Like arrows in the hands of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth. Like sands through the hourglass, so
are the days of our lives."
The family motto reads, Concordio Integritas Industria. Unity, integrity, industry. Meyer Rothschild planned to keep the wealth entirely in the family. He did this. The reason for this was so that you could keep the details of their fortune secret. So Meyer would arrange marriages of his sons with first or second cousins in the way royal families intermarry. Seeking to secure similar legacy, many other Jewish financiers in Europe repeated this ruse. And so the European banking fraternity, very Jewish, very familiar, and by today's standards one might even say incestuous. But it was their skill, their financial acumen that allowed them to take charge of most of the European economy right down to the present day. Donald Watkins wrote this. By 1815, Nathan Meyer Rothschild in England, by 1815, he had control of the Bank of England. So he had control of the nation and boldly declared this. Oops. Oh, I've got it on the wrong thing. There we go. He said, "Permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I don't care who makes the laws." Another translation has it, "I care not what puppet is placed upon the throne of England to rule the empire on which the sun never sets. The man who controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply." That's a nice modus ponens argument. That's logic. It's true. This became the Rothschild family's mantra. Control the world by controlling the world's money supply. Control the world by controlling the world's money supply. Let that sink in, because that model is still at work. And by the end of the 1800s, the Rothschild family controlled half of the world's wealth. Now, that would mean that they controlled most of the wealth in Europe and the New World, America. Over the centuries, the Rothschild scheme of early fractional reserve banking, fiat currency, loans, government bonds, and gold trading was perfected and expanded exponentially. And by the 19th century, the Rothschild dynasty became the world's premier fiat money lending behemoth. But why? Why were they able to do it? Why were they so successful? Aside from a disturbing level of commitment to familial loyalty, what was different? Well, I don't offer an answer to that question. I just throw it out there for you in the article to consider. Why do you think they were so successful? I think why do you think they were so successful? Why were they so successful at this? What was different about them? I mean, there's no right answer. I'm just thinking, what do you think? Where did their power come from? I think it probably has to do with the fact that they were willing to do anything for profit.
Certainly.
And that's what we find out. When you see that someone is willing to fund both sides of a war, that's a person who has no moral compass.
Correct.
They have no need for morality. They create their own morality as they go because their morality is profit. Whatever makes profit is good. What does that sound like? Right? That sounds like our world right now, right?
No qualms about using deception.
Yeah, it's about, today the idea is progress. Just why? Where are we going? Nobody knows, nobody cares, just progress.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the trick to their scheme was the art or the deception of loaning out more currency or banknotes, not actual money, but banknotes, than you have assets on hand to back. And this exists this day as the standard method of capital acquisition. It's the standard economic method or model. Now, I am no economist. That is clear. You can tell that already. I'm not a banker, and I'm not a businessman. Summer can tell you that. But anyway, it doesn't matter. A rudimentary explanation of this system, which is a type of usury that makes everyone feel as if they have more stuff, but it places the entire economy in peril. I can give that. Here are the top three things that banks don't want you to know. According to the law, legally, you don't deposit your money with a bank. You don't deposit your money with a bank. It becomes their money when you give it to them. It's no longer your money when you make a deposit. You don't possess it. It doesn't belong to you anymore. They account for this money that you've handed them as an asset. It's now their asset because it's legally their property now. Now this is the system that was established by the Rothschild banking, shall we say, cartel. So in return, when you give the bank your money, you get something like an IOU. Right? It's a deposit account. You get an accounting of the fact that you gave them money. An honest name for the account would be an unsecured loan to us account, right? You've made an unsecured loan to the bank because they could fail and your money would be gone. That's why it's unsecured. But if you call it a deposit, it sounds a little better. You're more willing to maybe do it. So number two, there is no such thing as the deposit insurance. Summer, we have learned this in the last year. What's the name of the bank in Silicon Valley that collapsed in like a day? We remember what that was. I can't remember the name of it right now. But and this is why. This will explain to you why the system can be manipulated. It'll explain to you why the system can collapse at any time. This will explain to you exactly how it's manipulated, puffed up, and collapsed on purpose too. Unlike real insurance, the government doesn't have enough money to cover your deposit, your unsecured loan that you've given them. So the government will print additional money to cover your loan to the bank if the bank goes bankrupt. And that is where we get the term inflation. When the bank, when there's more cash, banknotes, important looking pieces of paper out there in the market than there is actually gold or real assets to back it up. Third, inflation is simply a way of measuring a reduction in your purchasing power. Your important looking piece of paper is worth less than it used to be. It would better to call it a theft index, and it's because it's essentially a transfer of value from bank account holders to debtors. Usually this happens just a bit at a time, so you don't notice the missing money. Debtors benefit from inflation because they have to repay less value in real terms. So Who are by far the largest debtors in an economy? Oh, that would be the government. Remember what Meyer said? He will own the government. Doesn't care who makes the laws because he owns the money supply and therefore he owns the government. The government and the banking sector together by issuing IOUs.
Corporate governance.
Corporate governance. There you go. Who is mainly in charge of determining the amount of inflation in an economy? The government and the banking sector. So it's like having the fox in the hen house. It's like giving your money to a gangster and saying, hold that for me. I might come back and ask for it later. So recessions occur in an economy regularly, like an economy like this regularly, when there's a fractional reserve banking system at work. They're an inherent part of fractional reserve banking. In fact, they're designed to be as such. They're the norm. Recessions are the norm, not the exception. Inflation is the norm, not the exception. This is our modern fractional reserve banking system. It's not based on capitalism. It's more like a closed medieval guild system and will always exclude outgroups by its very nature. It is as destructive as it is dishonest. It is about as far away from the concept of value and from our better human values as you can possibly get. Now, the thing about this is the U.S. Constitution does not authorize any private for-profit corporation to create money, to coin money, to regulate its value, or to fix the standard of weights and measures. But that is exactly what the Rothschilds established in Europe and implemented in America through the robber barons, Rockefeller, Carnegie, Morgan, Harriman, and others. And they did this through the central bank. You can look at if you do a search, you can find a quote from Abraham Lincoln, who was looking for a way to fund the nation during the Civil War. So he had a meeting with the Rothschilds. They said, sure, we'll loan you all the money you need at 35% interest, and we want to be able to create a central bank in America. Well, Abraham Lincoln was smarter than that. He said, I'll be in touch, left, never talked to them again, and created his own banking scheme, sort of. He had a man there that worked with him that was familiar with Rothschild banking, and they set up their own scheme, and it was called the Greenbacks. Well, you can find that. I didn't include it in the article because the article is it's 5,000 words, about as far as we can go with it. By the way, thank you this way. Thank you for that super chat. Thank you very much. We certainly do appreciate your support. Yeah, it's a super sticker. That's a super sticker. You can do super chats, super stickers. As long as we're still monetized, you can. Who knows how long that will last? As we're talking about finance, it's talking about monetization here. Thank you, Leeway. And you're welcome, by the way. Thank you and you're welcome. What is the Federal Reserve? The Federal Reserve Bank is a system of 12 banks, and they are privately owned. They're not government. They're privately owned for-profit corporations, and they were initiated in 1913 by President Woodrow Wilson. Why did he do that? Well, because he got a campaign donation of $80,000 that convinced him to do that. It's a lot of money in 1913. So the Federal Reserve is a big problem. The Federal Reserve has never been audited. There are 600 registered shareholders of the Federal Reserve, and nobody knows who they are. At least it's not been publicly revealed ever. So, does that sort of close to the vest, very secretive kind of money lending, that kind of keep it in the family secrecy, does that sound familiar at all? More facts about the Federal Reserve. Over time, U.S. taxpayers have paid $286 billion to the Federal Reserve System in interest on money borrowed from the Federal Reserve. That money was issued from the U.S. Treasury. Where does the money in the U.S. Treasury come from? your taxes, the taxes from U.S. citizens. You see what's going on here? For example, send Meyer Rothschild, send him $100. And his bank will issue you back a loan at a fabulous rate of only 12% interest. The Rothschild system of creating something from a fraction of something until that which the people hold is eventually a lot of nothing has found a home in America and will eventually collapse the nation's economy exactly as it was designed to do. So the Rothschild banking system, they continued diversifying their operations in the 80s, 1980s and 90s into the 20th century now. Venturing into mergers and acquisitions, corporate finance and asset management. And in the 21st century, 2003, the French and British branches of the Rothschild family consolidated their banking operations under the leadership of David René de Rothschild, creating a single entity called Rothschild and Company, which marked a significant unification within the family's banking business. Today, Rothschild and Company operates as a multinational investment bank and financial services company still controlled by the Rothschild family and maintaining a significant presence in global financial markets. What's the answer to all this? How do you solve this fiat currency problem, right? See, the problem is that there's not enough labor and there's not enough goods or commodities out there to actually back all the currency that's out there in the world now. So what has to happen is, Summer, a great reset. Are you surprised?
No. This
Of course.
is the plan.
Of course, it's a great reset. That's what we have to have, right? And so what will back the value of money in the Great Reset, after the Great Reset? Well, what they would like to do is to transfer value away from real property because they don't want you owning any of that. They're going to have that for themselves. And the commodity that's going to back currency will be information, personal information, other kinds of information. Because with AI, information can be created out of nothing. Ex nihilo. It can't really, but I mean, in the hopes and dreams of the Klaus Schwabs of the world, right? Information is in limitless supply. So this is not good. And this is the problem with the concept of perpetual progress and ever-expanding economy. It puts the people who actually work to maintain the economy, the workforce, us, all of us, puts us in dire jeopardy of losing everything, literally at any minute. That's why your faith has to be in something eternal. The only eternal something. Human beings do not have infinite reserves of energy. This is just like the teaching on charity we were given the other day. We don't have infinite reserves of energy to work. We don't have infinite energy to work and create goods or provide services. The earth doesn't have infinite reserves of real property to back the perpetual printing of currency. At some point, the whole thing will collapse. It's inevitable. And that's why now they're trying to slowly implement some new system. I don't think they're going to do it. I don't think it's going to happen. I think something else is going to happen. But Summer and I probably disagree on that because I'm the glass half full guy. I have to be, because I just need to be. This is the crux of the Great Reset, to figure out how to siphon more value out of humanity and the Earth's resources while maintaining their position of power. So in our article, we've included a detailed account of how Nathan Rothschild colluded with his brothers and profited from the battle at Waterloo. And we've got a disclaimer in there with that too, because that's a disputed story, but you can read about that yourself. About how, all wars are bankers' wars. So the famous quote attributed to this same Nathan Rothschild is also, it's not really confirmed, or could be misattributed. However, it couldn't be more true. Let me issue and control the nation's money, and I don't care who makes the laws, because I control the government, because I control the money. So in the 20th century, during both world wars, N.M. Rothschild and Sons played a significant role in financing the British war effort, and after World War II, the bank helped finance the reconstruction of Europe and continued its growth internationally, establishing even more operations in key financial centers worldwide. The Rothschilds set the model for speculative finance during the 19th century as the major holders of wealth and assets necessary for rapidly expanding the industrial economies of Europe and America. They controlled the lion's share of the goods and infrastructure, such as large-scale mining, railroad, and shipping ventures that would power the Industrial Revolution of the late 19th century in the New World. So perfecting this system of perceived value artificially pumped and dumped markets and control of the very minds of the men they pushed along like pawns. It enriched and empowered the Red Shield to the rarefied air of becoming the largest privately held fortune in the modern world by the 19th century. In fact, there has never been a larger hold of private wealth in history. I cut out the part about the Red Shield, about Rothschild, Red Shield, Rothschild. It just comes from in the Jewish ghetto there in Frankfurt. You had to hang a sign or a shield on your house denoting your class and your business. And it so happens that their shield was red, and they took that name. There are other stories out there about that, but I'm satisfied that one seems to be the accurate one. You have to be careful. There are conspiracy theories out there. Well, as you said, America has a constitution that prevents this kind of thing, but they have found ways through U.S. Code, which is kind of another set of law that was established by the corporation that is the United States federal government. There's a rabbit hole we don't need to get into tonight. But the Rothschild family found its way into America during the Industrial Revolution via, among others, the Rockefellers in the oil industry, the Carnegies in steel, the Harrimans, Mr. Harriman in railroad. These men would become known as robber barons. They got their start by borrowing money from the Rothschilds. And so this infusion of capital allowed America's first industrial giants to establish monopolies and gain enormous power over the nation and its institutions. Power which is still firmly held to this day. And that brings us to...
This is the story of your enslavement. At first we mostly hunted and fished and ate off the land, but then something magical and terrible happened to our minds. We became, alone among the animals, afraid of death and of future loss. And this was the start of a great tragedy and an even greater possibility. You see, when we become afraid of death, of injury and imprisonment, we become controllable.
How about that? How about that, Summer? Does that remind you of 2020?
Indeed.
Become afraid of death, you are easily controlled. But if you're in Christ today, you don't have to be afraid of any such thing. All right, but here's the clip for now. The Robber Barons. This is a documentary that's also linked in our article, JFK to 9/11, a conspiracy classic. Part 1, everything is a rich man's trick.
We must, inevitably, step back into history. And most people will not like this very much, because most people have very little interest in history. This, however, is going to be a history lesson, quite unlike anything that anyone has ever heard. It certainly will be nothing like what we are taught in school, and yet it begins with a name which most people have heard, but probably won't be able to place. The name of E.H. Harriman. Who was E.H. Harriman?
Dynamite's ready, Butch.
Mr. E.H. Harriman himself, he had the confidence of...
Open the door or that's it! You think E.H. Harriman would get himself killed for you? Woodcock?
I worked for Mr. E.H. Harriman on the Union Pacific Railroad, and he entrusted me...
sure Americans in particular will be amused to learn that Edward Henry Harriman was actually a real historical figure. This man was one of America's first industrial giants, and like the Rockefellers in oil and the Carnegies in steel, he got his start by borrowing money from the Rothschilds, of whom we'll hear more later, to create a monopoly for his own business, which was railroads. He was the 19th century railroad king. It was a monopoly which wouldn't be allowed today, and it helped in turn to create the Rockefeller oil monopoly. And this gave America's first industrial giants colossal power. These were the first people in human history, we mustn't forget, whose businesses were worth more than most countries. People whose fortunes dwarfed anything that the Caesars or the Tudors or the Medici ever dreamed of. So, being greedy, they used this power to engage in price fixing. Naturally, they formed a cartel. Their attitude was that they could charge whatever they liked for steel and oil and transporting goods on the railways. They knew that all American business was dependent on them, and they'd made sure there was no competition. So they could ignore market forces and charge pretty much whatever they liked. Now this naturally caused resentment, and it's very interesting that the press at that time started calling these first Illuminati bankers and industrialists robber barons. Of course, once these fortunes began to be made, others naturally tried to get in on the act. One who succeeded was J.P. Morgan, who became a private banker during this period. But modern critics have discovered that far from being the richest man in America everyone thought he was, it turned out upon his death that Morgan actually only owned 17% of Morgan Bank, and that like so many others, he was simply a front for the Rothschild family.
There you go. I provided the clip I provided here in the article. I gave you the 4-minute mark to the 9-minute mark to get a really good background here. I'll stop it right here so you can watch it. But I encourage you to watch the whole thing because it's really good. It starts off with a theory about the JFK thing that happened in Dallas. That you know what it was. Whatever you think of that, it is one theory. But what's more interesting is just this general breakdown of how finance in the world has worked over the last 150 years. So it is from these men and this system that the term crony capitalism first came into the lexicon the way we use it today. It means capturing government power with wealth by those with enough financial resources to influence the direction of markets in order to stack the economic deck in their favor and to bend society toward their will. But put simply, this is just the redistribution of wealth toward the powerful by controlling and essentially replacing market economies with controlled political markets. Okay, now, we said earlier on we talked about how the Rothschilds created Israel. The Rothschild family has been deeply connected with Zionism since the notion of establishing a Jewish state was first considered in the 19th century. Baron Edmund James de Rothschild strongly supported the Zionist cause and laid the early groundwork for future Rothschild involvement, which Jacob Rothschild would gladly pick up and run with in the 20th century. Now, let's work a definition here for you. Zionism. What is Zionism? Zionism is a movement for the reestablishment, development, and protection of a Jewish nation. Where, Summer? In Palestine. That place that doesn't exist. Right? And until it's convenient that it does. Mm-hmm. Edmund Rothschild was so influential in the founding of Israel and so loved by Jews everywhere that he was affectionately given the nickname Hanadiv, which means the benefactor. Rothschild, the benefactor, the giver. The Rothschild organization, which was explicitly founded to fund the Zionist cause in Palestine, was called Yad Hanadiv in Edmund's honor. Through this organization, Edmund Rothschild awarded grants to fund settlements of Jews in Palestine. He would eventually be the prime force in creating what would come to be known as the State of Israel. Yad Hanadiv, this Rothschild Foundation, has funded a number of significant projects in Israel. They funded and built the Knesset, that's the Parliament building in Jerusalem. They funded and built the Supreme Court building in Jerusalem, funded and built the National Library of Israel, which is more than a library. It's actually a monument to Israel's cultural and intellectual heritage. What's funny about this is when the Rothschilds do it, it's not considered to be an ethno-state. It's not considered nationalism anymore. It's just considered the right thing to do. It's just Zionism. Not to be limited to infrastructure and cultural heritage alone, the Rothschild family's influence extended to political advocacy for the Zionist cause as well, of course. And so the powerful Rothschild mystique, the prestige, helped to garner more and more international support for the Zionist cause. Definition: the Balfour Declaration of 1917 was a public statement issued by the British government announcing support for establishing a national home for the Jewish people and a two-state proposal in Palestine. Doesn't that sound nice? It's a two-state proposal, Summer. It's a two-state proposal. That's very nice, isn't it? What does that really mean when you break it down? It means, right, that we're going to, let's just say Cuba decides to do a two-state solution in the United States. They're going to come in and we're so nice, we're not just going to take it over. We're going to create a Cuban state and a United States here. We'll do that because we're so, we're philanthropists. We're not gangsters, right? What if Canada decided to come into the United States and say, look, we're not going to take it all over. We're just going to split it down the middle and we'll create a Canadian state and you can have half. We'd be pretty pissed off, wouldn't we?
Indeed.
That's what happened. Well, Walter Rothschild, second Baron Rothschild, played a vital role in the Balfour Declaration. In fact, as we saw earlier, as you see here, that's who this Balfour Declaration was addressed to.
What do you feel when you see it here?
I genuinely feel it's one of the most extraordinary moments in the history of the Jewish people.
No doubt. The statement was explicitly addressed to Walter Rothschild and marked a significant milestone in Zionist history and the path to establishing the State of Israel. The Rothschild family continued to support Jewish causes and the development of Israel throughout the 20th century, regardless of United Nations declarations, regardless of international law, and despite significant public disapproval of the action. If you can find magazines and articles, and we have an internet now, and you can find them. You can look for these things out there and see, you look for periodicals from that time. Look for periodicals in the early 1900s or right around the time of the Balfour Declaration and right up until the creation of the State of Israel and look at this, listen to the sentiment in articles. I haven't found any that were supportive of the creation of the State of Israel. And there are reasons for that. It's not just because it's not anti-Semitism. There are reasons for this. You're pushing a people out. You're going to have to destroy one group of people to bring another one in. Well, the U.S. supported the Balfour Declaration, calling for the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine at first, even though public sentiment at the time was not supportive. But despite this lack of support, despite growing conflict between Palestinian Arabs and Palestinian Jews, and despite the Department of State's endorsement of a trusteeship rather than a state, Harry Truman ultimately decided to support the cause. And on May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion, who was then the head of the Jewish agency, who would become the first prime minister, proclaimed the establishment of the State of Israel. A symbolic 11 minutes later, U.S. President Harry S. Truman, oh, give them hell, Harry, recognized the state of Israel. And what that did was it instantly legitimized the new nation worldwide. Is it any wonder who influenced, oh, give them hell, Harry, on this one? I don't think it is. If you've been paying attention tonight, you know exactly why he decided to do that. It wasn't really in his interest. They made it in his interest. So, Jacob Rothschild continued this into the 20th century. He was deeply intertwined with Zionist causes until his death last Sunday. He continued his family's tradition of supporting these causes in what we here call Palestine, Israel, through the Yad Hanadiv Foundation, doing everything from philanthropic contributions to directly funding illegal Jewish settlements that were developed outside of the internationally designated and agreed upon borders. So Jacob Rothschild fostered many initiatives to strengthen Israel's social fabric while he did everything he could to destroy the social fabric everywhere else. Did everything he could to enhance Israel's global cultural diplomacy, while he did everything he could to destroy it, everything. And I'm probably being too harsh on Jacob here. He continued a legacy, right? This thing was already in place when he got here. In fact, it is true that Jacob Rothschild broke away from the family in 1980 to create his own banking firm, which is now the biggest financial advisory firm in Britain. Well, Jacob's engagement with Zionism wasn't just a matter of financial support, but it represents a continuing commitment to the security of the Jewish homeland. That means military. That means funding war. Psalm 37, 1 through 4 says, "Fret not yourself because of evildoers. Be not envious of wrongdoers, for they will soon fade like the grass." What is it, Sam? What fades like grass?
The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our Lord will stand forever.
And they, too, soon will fade like grass and wither like the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good. Dwell in the land and befriend faithfulness. Delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Don't worry. Don't worry about the ungodly. It's a common thing for the righteous to fret or be envious of those of the wicked when they prosper. Asaph was bothered by this kind of problem. He was bugged, irritated by the fact that the wicked all around him were prospering. In Psalm 73, he wondered, why do the wicked prosper so much? One theologian said it this way: to fret is to worry. Actually, the term here, don't fret about it, actually means to burn, to fume. This is harmful. It's wrong. And it's needless. Let the one who trusts wait. Wait for the Lord. And events that are happening around us now will justify the action when it's all said and done. Romans 8:28. It is as foolish as it is wicked to repine or be envious at the prosperity of others, whether they are godly or ungodly. It is God who is the dispenser of the bounty they enjoy, and most assuredly He has the right to do what He will with His own. To be envious in such a case is to arraign the providence of God. It's to accuse God. So to worry about when the wicked prosper, to be envious of what they have, is to accuse God. Don't do that. They shall soon be cut down like grass. This metaphor is used in the Bible because the Bible is a Jewish text. It comes out of the Levant, known as the Middle East. This is an area there's a lot of harsh land there, a lot of what we would call desert-like. And so in the spring in the Middle East, especially there in Palestine. Vegetation comes up fast after the rains, and then it can go away just as quickly. It can lose that beauty in one day of a hot, dry desert wind. So that's what it means. That's what the world is. It comes and it's beautiful, and then it's gone. David gives the same answer that he gave to Asaph in Psalm 73, understanding that any prosperity experienced by the workers of iniquity is temporary. Jacob Rothschild knows that now. Grass is green for a season, and so is the herb, but they both wither quickly. Charles Spurgeon said, "We think of a wicked man eating a magnificent dinner, having a feast, while a godly man goes hungry. The wicked man eats anything and everything he wants, and his table is loaded, and he enjoys his meal. Then we see the bigger picture. He eats his last meal on death row, and in a moment will face terrible judgment. Now, with larger perspective, the godly man doesn't envy or worry about the wicked man. Evil men, instead of being envied, are to be viewed with horror and aversion. Yet their loaded tables and gilded trappings are too apt to fascinate our poor, half-opened eyes." Unquote. Charles Spurgeon. Another theologian said, "The test is found over time. All the apparent prosperity of the wicked is transient. It passes and perishes, as do the wicked themselves." Verses 3 and 4. "Put your trust and your joy, your delight in the Lord." Instead of worrying and envying, David counseled the man or woman of God to simply trust God and do for His glory. It's amazing how easily, how quickly that we can get distracted by what's going on in the world. We can get distracted away from the very simple task of trusting God and doing His will. We get distracted looking at what seems to be prosperity of the wicked. And that's one way we're often distracted. Charles Spurgeon again said, "Faith cures fretting. Faith cures fretting. You don't have any faith. That faith comes from God." Sight is cross-eyed and views things only as they seem, hence her envy. Faith has clearer vision to behold things as they really are, hence her peace. You'll find peace in faith. David also counseled the man or woman of God to leave aside worry and envy by simply enjoying the blessings, the simple blessings that you have every moment. He provided Israel a land to enjoy, and His faithfulness was like food for them every day. Well, let's be clear, we're talking about Israel in the Old Testament. David advised the man or woman of God to replace worry and envy with a conscious delight. That means you have to make an effort. You have to decide that you're going to do it. And that's something the Lord can bless. It means to cheer your heart and mind by considering and by faith receiving these multiple simple blessings that God's given us every day. So what does it mean to delight yourself in the Lord, to find joy? Expect, what the Lord said, expect all your happiness from Him and seek it. Expect happiness from Him and seek it from Him. It includes a deliberate redirection of your emotions, just like Paul and Silas did in prison, singing and praying. We cannot delight without effort. The one who sits back in the couch and just waits for God to bless him is unlikely to receive it. You have to withdraw your eager desires from the things of the earth and attach them, fix them on the Lord. Spurgeon said, in a certain sense, imitate the wicked. Hang on. Because they delight in their reward that they have now. So imitate the wicked in this sense. Take care to delight in your future reward. And so far from envying, then you will pity the prosperous wicked. The reason many apparent Christians do not delight in God this way is because they don't know Him very well. They have some other God in mind. The reason they don't know Him very well because they don't spend time with Him. And the way you do that is through the ordinary means of grace, which we've talked about here. That's prayer, the Scripture, and fellowship. And it says there at the last, He will give you the desires of your heart. Now there is beautiful and a safe, guaranteed promise. The one who truly finds joy in the Lord will find his heart and his desires changed. You won't envy anything in the world anymore. You will progressively be sanctified, steadily become aligned with God's own good desires. And so you see that when you find joy or delight in God, that's the key to happiness. That's the secret, which is no secret at all. It's possible for such desires to be clouded by sin or selfishness, but even when they are clouded, there's almost always some kind of faithful root to the desire that is entirely in the will of God. So the man or woman of God should find his or her rest in this and leave aside worry and envy. So the principle of Psalm 37:4, delight yourself in the Lord and He will give you the desires of your heart, is the foundation for a principle sometimes called heathen Christianism. It's called that by John Piper in his book. And normally you think of hedonism as idolatry, the idolatry of pleasure, doing everything for pleasure, which is, that's the world. That's like the Stoics in the, you see in Acts, the Epicureans and the Stoics. This term has been used to describe a righteous pursuit of satisfaction and pleasure that is rooted in a focus on God. It can be found. Most of all, it shows that when we decide, that when we choose, that when we make an effort to find joy in the Lord, that He will bless us. He will give us that delight. He will put it in our heart. And if He is your delight, then He will give you more of Himself. He will pour into you. That's the promise of the Scriptures. That's not some mystical idea. It's just a promise. Later on in Psalm 37, verses 30 and 31, it says, the character of God's righteous one. This is about what is our character? How should our character be? The mouth of the righteous one utters wisdom, and his tongue speaks justice. The laws of his God in his heart, his steps do not slip. So the mouth of the righteous speaks wisdom. David again turns to the conduct of God's righteous man or woman. The righteous man or woman is characterized by the possession of and love for God's word in a way that would be truly fulfilled by the new covenant. He has the word of God in his heart. Jeremiah 31:33. Because of this knowledge that you get from the word of God, that when you read it, study it, as the New Testament says, when you eat it and digest it, make it part of you. When you become reliant upon it, when you believe it, you won't slide, you won't slip, you won't slide away. One theologian said, he that has a Bible in his head has God in his heart. Please take a moment to like this video, share it with somebody, because that's the only way it's going to get to other people. You can engage with the video by leaving a comment, hitting that thumbs up button. Download the Armor of Truth mobile app today, my friends. It's 100% free. You will get live notifications. You'll get direct links whenever and wherever we go live. You get exclusive content, articles, reports, and resources, podcast material, Bible studies. If you can support Armor of Truth financially, always support your local church first. But if you can, please know every donation of any amount makes a difference. You can use the Armor of Truth mobile app Give tab or visit our website, armoroftruth.net/donate, or follow the links in the description under this video. If you can set up a recurring monthly donation to help us plan for the future of AOT, that really helps a lot. So what are you waiting for? Download the Armor of Truth mobile app now. My name is Brad, and I am once again here joined by my talented and precious wife, Summer. Together, we're Armor of Truth, and we're seeking a worldview revolution through God's revelation.
Faith is resistance.
See you, folks.
See you guys. Thank you.